There was once a big, rich country, called itself a democracy. One day, the most powerful person in that country, the president, started telling a lie. A big lie that struck at the core of any republic, the transfer of power through an election. The president kept shouting the lie, and many in his political party, elected officials and voters, joined in. Most professional journalists looked at the evidence and the many court cases that had tested the president's claims and called the story unfounded. Some called it what it was, a lie. But other media outlets, including some with huge audiences and influence, amplified the lie. Millions of people believed the lie, and some acted on it, violently and disastrously. Many in this big, powerful country had long said, that kind of thing can't happen here. But it could, and it did. So, what would happen next?
Hey, John. That's a disturbing fable. I wish it was just a fable.
Yeah, I mean, by January of 2021, people in the U.S. and the world had watched the rise of Donald Trump and his MAGA movement and had been debating how much of a threat this movement posed by that point for 5 years or so.
I mean, what happened on January 6th should have answered that question. And it seemed to for a minute.
Yeah.
But even though Donald Trump's lie didn't achieve its main goal at the time, the transfer of power did happen. That wasn't the end of the story, obviously.
And for us and our project here, the question is not only what would happen next, but also how much blame can we put on the news media for what happened next?
Because Trump's big lie and the challenge that it posed for all of us is just one piece of a much bigger story. Is there something in the structure of this country's media system that has made it unwilling or unable to do what the world needed it to do in the face of an authoritarian demagogue and his allies and followers?
That's the question for this episode. But first, we're going to take a good few minutes here at the top to summarize what did happen next, after this country chose to put Donald Trump back in power in 2024, despite everything. And this is all well-established stuff, straight out of the news that we all have access to.
And here's a suggestion. As you're listening to this litany, imagine we're describing a regime in another country, on the other side of the world, or in South America. A government led by somebody with a name like Putin or Maduro.
So here goes, an incomplete list. On his first day in office, the president pardoned the rioters who tried to overturn the last election and block the transfer of power.
More than 1,500 pardons or commutations in all for the people who violently stormed the U.S. Capitol.
With the backing of a Congress controlled by his party, the president has built a massive domestic paramilitary force with funding larger than the military budgets of most countries. The president has sent this force of mass federal agents in tactical gear to roam through select cities.
Shooting pepper balls into faces, using cars to move people, and even employing chokeholds on protesters.
The agents arrest immigrants who don't have papers for deportation, often seizing them without due process, and in many cases sweeping up legal residents and citizens who happen to be brown or black or speak with a foreign accent.
The biggest surges of federal agents and of National Guard and military troops have gone to cities and states led by the opposition party.
We have seen these kinds of operations in other places, in other countries, but not here in America.
That's fine, dude. I'm not mad.
When federal agents killed citizens who were observing and trying to protect their neighbors, the regime called the killings justified before looking at the evidence, blocked local investigations, and slandered the victims.
This government arrested and tried to deport legal residents, people with student visas or green cards, who expressed views the administration doesn't like.
A graduate student at Columbia University arrested by ICE officials for his role in the pro-Palestinian protests.
Surveillance video shows a graduate student at Tufts University near Boston being taken into custody by federal agents.
The administration is building a vast network of detention camps to hold undocumented immigrants it plans to deport. And just maybe, the president has said, other people too.
Many of them were born in our country. I think we ought to get them the hell out of here too. You want to know the truth. So maybe that'll be the next job that we'll work on together.
The president's Pentagon chief carried out a purge of the military, firing generals seen as insufficiently aligned with the regime. He dismissed military attorneys whose job, in part, is to make sure that no illegal orders are given or followed by the military.
The president installed loyalists at the top of the nation's leading law enforcement agency.
President Trump, the greatest president in American history.
And shattered its traditional independence.
President Trump putting extraordinary pressure on his Attorney General Pam Bondi, publicly calling on her to use the power of the Justice Department to prosecute his political enemies.
Breaking news, former FBI Director James Comey has just been indicted by the Department of Justice.
New York Attorney General Letitia James has been indicted.
The regime has gutted entire federal agencies and pushed out hundreds of thousands of federal workers. Judges have declared at least some of the firings illegal.
The administration has attacked the independence of universities.
Threatening to withhold billions of dollars from universities that do not bend to the will of the administration.
And used threats to pressure law firms, including firms with lawyers who worked on past investigations of the president himself.
The administration sued news organizations, arrested independent journalists for doing journalism, and expelled a leading wire service from the White House because it declined to go along with the president's renaming of a body of water.
On the world stage, the U.S. has thrown its weight around for generations, but has usually claimed noble justifications for its invasions and carried out coups covertly. The actions of this regime have experts talking about an America gone entirely rogue.
We are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not.
Trump claims the right to seize other countries or their territory if he decides to.
Cuba, whether I free it, take it, I think I can do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth?
Or to invade a neighboring nation, seize its leader, and control its resources, in what the economists called the return of gunboat capitalism.
We're going to run the country right. It's going to be run very judiciously, very fairly. It's going to make a lot of money.
And he launched a major war of choice in the Middle East.
Thick plumes of smoke drifting across Tehran on Saturday morning.
Assassinating a foreign leader with no justification under U.S. or international law.
The White House has ordered the military to destroy boats and the people in them, in or near another country's waters.
The deadly military airstrike on what officials say, without providing evidence, was a drug boat.
This is simply a criminal act of murder.
Using authoritarian language, the president and his aides have said clearly that they recognize few, if any, limits on their power.
We are the storm, and our enemies cannot comprehend our strength, our determination.
Is there anything that could stop you if you wanted to?
Yeah, there's one thing, my own morality, my own mind. It's the only thing that can stop.
We haven't even talked about the unprecedented corruption, the monetizing of the presidency at a scale this country has never seen. The Trump family deals with Middle Eastern kingdoms, signed with Trump in the White House. The meme coins and crypto schemes.
It's crypto-friendly legislation coming from the President of the United States, who is in turn cashing in on the crypto phase, personally, his family.
Conflict of interest.
Those broadcasters expressing consternation are with Fox Business, of all places.
So yeah, that's some of what happened in the first 1 year plus of the second Trump term. But also remember this. Trump didn't fly in from another planet and seize control of the United States.
Yeah, and that point is at the heart of where we're going with this episode. Here's one more clip. This is the Princeton professor Eddie Glaude talking on MS Now in early 2026. This was part of a conversation about Trump's attempt to bully Denmark into handing over Greenland, and the deep damage that episode caused in the way that other countries, including America's closest allies, view the United States.
It's not just Trump. The American people elected him twice. And so it's not just that he's not trustworthy. We're not trustworthy.
There you go. From the perspective of much of the world now, the American electorate, and really our whole democratic system that produced this result, has gone haywire.
Thousands of experts, pundits, and authors have tried to explain how it happened, how Donald Trump got himself elected twice, and how he's been able to take America so far down the road toward authoritarian dictatorship. We've talked before about important elements of that story on Scene on Radio.
It's no doubt that multiple forces had to come together. But we can still ask, could this crisis have been avoided if the U.S. had a different kind of media system? What role has the news played in this national and international disaster?
From the Kenan Institute for Ethics at Duke University, this is Scene on Radio, Season 8, The News, Episode 7. I'm John Biewen, host and producer of the show. That was Chenjerai Kumanyika, journalism professor at NYU, podcast creator and organizer. He'll be back later to talk more. In this episode, how did the failings of our news and information system help to bring the United States to this dangerous place?
What a terrific crowd this is.
Let's go back a few decades and start with some changes that were more about politics than about the media itself.
There is a religious war going on in this country. It is a cultural war as critical to the kind of nation we shall be as the Cold War itself, for this war is for the soul of America.
Patrick Buchanan, speaking at the 1992 Republican National Convention in Houston. He was endorsing George H.W. Bush for re-election after challenging Bush unsuccessfully for the GOP nomination. Buchanan had worked in the Nixon and Ford administrations and served as Ronald Reagan's communications director. But more than any of them, Buchanan represented the populist, far-right, some would say white nationalist wing of his party.
Like many of you,
here he's talking about the Democratic National Convention held a few weeks before,
where 20,000 liberals and radicals came dressed up as moderates and centrists in the greatest single exhibition of cross-dressing in American political history.
During his campaign, Buchanan railed against the gay rights and feminist movements, abortion rights, and what he called an invasion of undocumented immigrants.
Here you have conservative figures like Pat Buchanan emerging. He looks around and he says that the biggest vacuum in U.S. politics is to the right of Ronald Reagan.
Nicole Hemmer teaches history at Vanderbilt. She wrote about Buchanan and other 1990s conservative revolutionaries, as she calls them, in her book, Partisans.
His father had been a big fan of Franco in Spain and that dictatorship, and Buchanan himself was an admirer of dictators around the world. And he thought that America had become too diverse, too democratic, and wanted to reverse that. And so he has this whole package of ideas that he calls America First.
Those who did this to you have forgotten you and walked away from you. Together, you and I can take America back and make her great again. Paid for by Buchanan for president.
His 3 presidential campaigns failed, but Hemmer argues Buchanan anticipated Trumpian politics in lots of important ways. And like Donald Trump, Buchanan was a TV star before he ran for office.
He was the host of CNN's Crossfire. He was a regular on PBS's The McLaughlin Group. And people knew him from media, and the media environment was changing dramatically in the 1990s, and all of those things came together to help forge this new right-wing politics that feels very familiar today.
From Washington, Crossfire. On the left, Mike Kinsley. On the right, Pat Buchanan.
By the 1990s, parts of the media revolution were underway. On cable, CNN had been around since 1980. Talk radio on the AM dial, dominated by right-wing hosts, was drawing millions of devoted listeners. The end of the Fairness Doctrine in 1987 meant a station could be as one-sided as it wanted to be. Rush Limbaugh's show went national the following year. In this riff from 1992, Limbaugh is disparaging school teachers.
Then you go on strike to protest how unfairly you're being treated in about the second year if you've been a teacher. And then if you end up lucky enough in New York, you got to teach anal sex with all kinds of books and so forth. It's a great life. It really is, and I think more people ought to aspire to it.
On television, Fox News wouldn't come along until 1996, but Hemmer says other networks, like CNN with Crossfire, and even PBS with its show The McLaughlin Group, were succeeding with a new niche: loud political jousting.
As you start to move over into cable, when you're suddenly fighting with 30 channels instead of just 2 for eyeballs, you start to get the rise of political entertainment. Crossfire is Pat Buchanan yelling at a liberal. The McLaughlin Group is 3 conservatives and 2 liberals shouting at one another. People eat this stuff up.
We need term limits and get rid of all of them. The whole audience will.
Why don't they vote against them if they're so mad?
I hope George Bush will run against the Congress of the United States. If he does, he'll pick up seats and he'll win a landslide.
Well, there you go. There's a lot of haranguing. No answer to my question, but I'm used to that from the left.
There were people observing these trends who sounded the alarm.
Here's just what I wanted to tell you guys. Yeah. Stop. Stop hurting America. Okay,
That's Jon Stewart, host of The Daily Show on Comedy Central, famously confronting Paul Begala and Tucker Carlson, who by then were co-hosts of Crossfire, in 2004. In their tense exchange, Stewart compares Crossfire to pro wrestling. And while he's at it, ridicules Carlson.
No, this is theater. I mean, it's obvious. How old are you?
35.
And you wear a bow tie.
Yeah, I do. I do.
So this is.
No, I know. You're right. No, let me just go. No, come on.
And listen, I'm not suggesting that you're not a smart guy, because those are not easy to tie. But the thing is that you're doing theater when you should be doing debate, which would be great.
No, it's
not
true.
Honest. What you do is not honest. What you do is partisan hackery. And I'll tell you why.
But the political point scoring on a show like Crossfire looked almost genteel by the time Stewart critiqued it. Fox News went live in 1996. It adopted the slogan, fair and balanced. To a lot of people, that was not so much a promise as a signal. For viewers who had long accepted the right-wing message that most news organizations tilted liberal. The conservative network's audience share shot up quickly, thanks in part to its owner, Rupert Murdoch, with his enormous wealth and aggressive marketing moves.
Fox News got its start with Rupert Murdoch paying carriers to carry Fox News extraordinary amounts of money.
Most cable networks charged cable distributors to carry their shows. Murdoch reversed that equation, shelling out hundreds of millions of dollars to providers that agreed to carry Fox. Nicole Hemmer points to at least one reason that no left-leaning cable news channel managed to keep up.
It takes a ton of investment, and the left didn't have those same kinds of deep pockets committed to a political media project.
Only 6 years after it went on the air, in 2002, Fox News overtook CNN as the most popular cable news channel. Fast forward to 2016, a pivotal year in American politics. That year, for the first time, Fox News became the country's #1 cable channel, period, beating out even the sports juggernaut ESPN. The stage was set, in the political economy and in the media sphere. And a long-shot candidate, a bombastic real estate developer and reality TV star, stepped onto that stage.
Well, what people forget is that the concept of Donald Trump actually winning the 2016 election was absolutely incredible. It was not something people took seriously.
That's Dan Froomkin, a longtime political reporter and media critic.
I have a newsletter/website called Press Watch.
It's not true to suggest that nobody took Trump seriously. Just weeks after he announced, in the summer of 2015, this happened on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Keith Ellison, who is now the Attorney General of Minnesota, but was then a progressive Democratic congressman, shook up a roundtable conversation about the Republican primary field.
All I want to say is that anybody from the Democratic side of the fence who's terrified of the possibility of President Trump better vote, better get active, better get involved, because this man has got some momentum, and we better be ready for the fact that he might be leading the Republican ticket.
Next, I know you don't believe that, but I want to go on.
Sorry to laugh.
The person laughing the loudest, along with Stephanopoulos, was Maggie Haberman, the star political reporter for the New York Times. By no means were all journalists so relaxed. Lots of writers and reporters in the progressive left media called out the threat posed by Trump, and the Boston Globe in April 2016 ran a mock front page from a year in the future, envisioning, among other things, a mass deportation campaign and a devastating trade war under a Trump presidency. But for some in the legacy media, Trump's campaign seemed to be more a source of entertainment and ratings and clicks than a serious bid for the White House. The head of CBS, Leslie Moonves, said at a business conference during the 2016 campaign that Trump's candidacy may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS. He later said he was joking.
It is my high honor and distinct privilege to introduce to you the President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
After Trump defeated Hillary Clinton, some in the mainstream media took fierce criticism and accusations they had tipped the scales in his favor, whether they meant to or not. Those making that allegation included people who worked for Trump's Republican rivals, like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. Some people criticized CNN, for example, for carrying Trump's campaign rallies live at the expense of other candidates because of his knack for making news with outlandish statements. The president of CNN at the time, Jeff Zucker, told a reporter in 2017, "Politics is sport. We understood that and approached it that way." Dan Froomkin was writing for The Intercept in 2016. He'd previously written a politics newsletter for The Washington Post. Dan believes that because most reporters with the legacy media didn't think Trump could win, they set out to earn their stripes as accountability journalists by leaning into scandals involving Hillary Clinton.
The net effect was that they sort of overlooked the extraordinary danger that Trump presented and went overboard in attacking Hillary Clinton for things that, in retrospect, look quaint. The amount of coverage over her email server was wildly disproportionate.
Froomkin told me he's almost inclined to give the mainstream media a pass for 2016 because Trump seemed like a long shot. It's also easy to remember some pundits expected Trump to behave more like a normal president once he settled into the job. But
you still can't forgive what they did, when it became clear that he was going to run again after January 6th.
All Vice President Pence has to do is send it back to the states to recertify, and we become president, and you are the happiest people. Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
On January 6, 2021, and for months before that day, here was a sitting president for the first time in U.S. history, actively maneuvering to overturn his defeat and stay in power.
reach of the Capitol to the upper level.
What happened here today was an insurrection incited by the President of the United States.
That was Republican Senator Mitt Romney. But many in Trump's party, including a majority of Republicans in the U.S. House, backed his drive to overturn the election.
I, Paul Gosar from Arizona.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
I rise for myself and 60 of my colleagues to object to the counting of the electoral ballots from Arizona.
He was clearly a danger to democracy at that point. The party was clearly a party of radical extremists.
Froomkin argues when it became clear that Trump would run again in 2024 and would likely be the nominee, a responsible news media in a democracy would have seen that it had one job.
They should have recognized that we were in a state of emergency as a nation. They should have stated very clearly that if elected, Trump would turn America into, a racist authoritarian regime where facts don't matter. That would not have been a radical prediction. Project 2025 was there. Trump was clearly surrounding himself with even more extreme people, more loyalists. And instead, they maintained this above the fray view. I mean, they wrote some very critical stories about Donald Trump, but on a day-to-day basis, they didn't make the argument that supporting him was a radical and extremist position to take. They made it sound like supporting him was just something some people did and other people didn't. I wrote a piece before the election saying, if Trump wins, blame the New York Times. And I meant it.
Again, let's distinguish between legacy media, like the Times, and alternative media. Lots of journalists in the left press were loud and crystal clear about the dangers that Trump, too, would pose, as were some on the opinion pages of the New York Times. But Dan Froomkin and many other media critics, including some never-Trump conservatives, have highlighted countless examples where, in their view, the legacy media have failed to defend democracy in the age of Trump. Here's just one example that Froomkin and I discussed. In September of 2022, President Joe Biden gave a speech to the nation from Independence Hall in Philadelphia, where the framers shaped the U.S. Constitution.
This is where we set in motion the most extraordinary experiment of self-government the world has ever known. With 3 simple words, we the people.
Biden said that he, as president, had a duty to level with the people, to tell Americans painful truths.
And here, in my view, is what is true. MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people. They refuse to accept the results of a free election. And they're working right now, as I speak, in state after state, to give power to decide elections in America to partisans and cronies, empowering election deniers to undermine democracy itself.
Ahead of the 2022 midterm elections, he called on Americans to come together and vote to protect democracy. In the New York Times, Peter Baker, the paper's chief White House correspondent, delivered his analysis under the headline, "A Rematch of Biden v. Trump 2 years early." Much of the framing in Baker's piece was about political strategy. He wrote, for example, if it sounded like a repeat of the 2020 campaign cycle, in some ways it is. Baker said Biden had put aside his pledge to be a unifier and suggested the president was talking about democracy to distract from high inflation and his own unpopularity. On Twitter, or X, Dan Froomkin wrote this about Baker's take. The arrogance, the cluelessness, and the failure to match the moment. Baker has truly outdone himself.
Yeah, it's a great example. And, why did Peter Baker write it that way? Because that's what his editors wanted. They didn't want an article that looked like it was taking Biden's side.
To be clear, this is speculation. There's no evidence Baker was doing the bidding of his bosses.
So that meant having to qualify it and put it at arm's length and look at it as a political strategy and not as an actual clarion call, which it was.
If you were writing that analysis piece for the front page of the Times after Biden's speech, what of the central framing, what could it have been?
Joe Biden warned of the Republican Party is anti-democratic, and he provided evidence, and his evidence is correct.
A few seconds later, Dan adjusted his wording. He said he would have written that the evidence supports Biden. In that Times analysis, Peter Baker never ventures to say whether Biden's description of MAGA Republicans is accurate. Instead, he writes that Republicans and Democrats each accuse the other of threatening democracy. I reached out to the New York Times to ask for its response to Froomkin's criticism of that Baker piece. I was delighted to get an answer. But then the answer only seemed to reinforce Froomkin's take. The paper told me Peter Baker wasn't available for an interview, but a spokesperson sent a statement. It said Baker and the Times' newsroom have uncovered and analyzed more about Donald Trump's actions as president and his financial and business history and legal troubles than any news outlet in America. Getting closer to the point, the statement said media critics like Froomkin are wrong to want independent media to take a side. To a lot of people, and certainly to most Trump supporters, it might sound bananas to cast blame on the New York Times for Trump's victory in 2024. It's true, the paper does a lot of sharp investigative reporting on Trump's actions and policies, and most of its columnists are bluntly critical of Trump. But some critics, including Froomkin, say that in its all-important headlines and news copy, the newspaper of record routinely uses euphemistic language to describe Trump's flagrant violations of laws and norms, saying he's testing boundaries or raising concerns or similar tepid phrases. That overly cautious approach, Froomkin tells me, ripples out across a media landscape that takes its cues from legacy media, and especially the Times. But another prominent journalist and media watcher offers a counterpoint to this blame the Times take. Michael Tomasky is editor of The New Republic. He, too, explains Trump's 2024 election by pointing at the media, but not mainly the legacy press.
Right-wing media is now bigger and more powerful in the United States than the mainstream media in terms of agenda setting, in terms of, deciding what it is we all talk about and react to and respond to. And that had so much to do with why somebody as outrageous and so many other adjectives, but somebody like Donald Trump could win a presidential election.
It's debatable whether right-wing media is ultimately more powerful and influential than mainstream media. We discussed that complicated question in episode 3. But Tomasky thinks it is, and he uses a visual analogy to make his point. Once upon a time, he says, pre-1990s, the mainstream media was dominant, the size of a beach ball, compared with right-wing media, a little golf ball. Today, he says, the mainstream media have shrunk to the size of a volleyball, and right-wing media have swelled into a basketball, which, if you're not sure, is a bit bigger than a volleyball.
And no one listening to our voices should think that the right is satisfied with this rough parity. They're not. They want to control as much as they possibly can.
For Tomasky, a powerful illustration of the role played by right-wing media came late in the 2024 presidential campaign, with a tight race hanging in the balance.
People will remember Trump's Madison Square Garden rally a week before the election.
I'm not just MAGA, I'm dark, gothic MAGA.
At that rally in New York City, Trump and his followers let fly with some of their ugliest rhetoric. Trump spoke of a vicious, crooked, radical left machine that runs the Democratic Party, and called his political opponents the enemy from within.
For the past 9 years, we have been fighting against the most sinister and corrupt forces on earth.
Another speaker called Kamala Harris, the vice president and Democratic nominee, the devil and the Antichrist. But for all that, the speaker who stole the show was a comedian and podcaster, Tony Hinchcliffe.
Madison Square Garden, how we feeling, huh?
He made several crude remarks about Latinos, including that they love making babies, before getting to this joke.
You know, there's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Hinchcliffe also worked in a joke about black people and watermelon, and one about the Jews involving the love of money. The rally was so off the chain, even by MAGA standards, that those usually cautious mainstream news outlets used words like offensive, vulgar, incendiary, and racist in their headlines. Some drew comparisons to a Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden in 1939.
I thought, okay, he's done. He can't survive this. You know, this might even hurt him in Florida. There's just no way he can survive a train wreck like this.
But Michael would soon realize that was old school thinking. The next day, on America's leading cable TV channel.
I'm sure you saw it live right here on Fox News Channel. Former President Donald Trump made one last pitch to voters in the world's most famous arena yesterday.
The cheerful pro-Trump morning show, Fox and Friends, presented the event as a normal, star-studded political rally in America.
And the former president sharing a message of hope with that massive crowd.
With a very rare Lee Greenwood actually singing the song live, God Bless the USA, just off on the side of the stage. It was cool.
About 10 minutes in, the Fox and Friends hosts did acknowledge the controversy that non-right-wing outlets were focused on. They called the comedian's remarks offensive, but dismissed them as part of a warm-up act. They suggested those horrified by the rally couldn't take a joke.
It's comedy.
And anyway, were hopelessly biased.
It's amazing, the cover of the New York Times. Trump at Garden, a closing carnival of grievances, misogyny, and racism. Oh, only somebody who worked for the Harris campaign and pretending to be a reporter for the New York Times would write something like that.
Michael Tomasky.
It probably helped him, that rally, the neo-fascist rally. And it's because the right-wing media said there was nothing wrong with this. This was patriotism. This was great. And so they washed that away. If there were no right-wing media, that rally would have been devastating to Trump.
Chenjerai, we got stuff to talk about.
Yes, we do. Starting with that rally in 2024.
Yeah.
There's so much has happened that I forget, like, wow, that really happened.
And what do you make of Michael Tomasky's argument that if it weren't for right-wing media, that event would have been much more devastating to Trump's candidacy at that moment?
That one is tricky because certainly, what was said at that rally was outrageous, but I don't know if I think that without the right-wing media's contribution there, that everybody would have been outraged and he would have lost the election. There seems to be like a lot of evidence that when Trump leans into this kind of speech or these kind of spectacles, there's a lot of people who connect to it. They feel like it names things that they haven't been able to say because of wokeness or political correctness. And they actually, the more the media names the stuff in certain ways and calls it bigotry, that seems to even fuel the fire even more. So I don't know about that, but I do think that the right-wing media played a role in the larger historical arc that allows that rally to even happen in 2024.
The fact that you had right-wing media for the last 30 years telling a large segment of the American people, don't listen to the mainstream media if they have an issue with something like this, because they're woke, biased enemies of the people. That has probably had an effect, and that figures into that story.
Yeah, absolutely. But, part of what I think was missing in this longer period that led to the ability to have a rally like this was the mainstream media's inability to name this stuff accurately as it was unfolding. This is being called like a neo-fascist rally. And, I've heard people, make comparisons to like Nazi rallies. But I've also seen the mainstream media not celebrate Nazis, but just not quite name what needs to be said. But I think it's important for us to get the critique of the mainstream media right.
It's nuanced, and I think a lot of people have trouble with this critique, the sort of critique that Dan Froomkin makes that we heard here, and that many other people make of the mainstream media's failure to sort of meet the moment.
I mean,
let's tease that apart.
Wait a minute. Let me ask you this question. When you say a lot of people have trouble with the critique, which people do you mean? Because everybody I know is infuriated about the mainstream media. That's why we made this series, right?
Honestly, I think nobody has more trouble with it than people who work in the mainstream media. Maybe particularly people who are sort of in leadership positions and management and ownership positions in the mainstream media.
Right. No, I mean, but actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, I will say there are people who feel that the problem with the media is that it has an agenda. So they might hear us critiquing the fact that the media has not named things and say, see, that's the problem, which you guys are calling for, right? Like, the media should be, they're not supposed to just be like another partisan side in this debate or something.
Yes, and of course, that's, as we heard, that's exactly what the New York Times said in response to that critique of their White House correspondent's treatment of the Joe Biden speech in 2022. You're asking us to take a side and to be part of the resistance, and that's not what we do.
Which is like, I really want people to get this.
Yeah.
Because to me, the idea that the media is not supposed to just go along with partisan talking points of anybody, I basically buy that, right? Because journalists have to be focused on what's true.
We should be independent, ultimately.
Right. We have to have the autonomy.
Absolutely.
But to say that, like, when Biden is, or anybody is saying, there's a lot of people in the conservative movement who don't, accept the results of elections, even in the face of so much proof about election results, that they have real issues with the Constitution. These are like things you can investigate empirically, and people have.
Yeah, to have the majority of Republican members of Congress trying to aid in the overturning of an election that by all evidence was free and fair, and Biden won and Trump lost. That's what Biden was referring to in that speech, that we now have a movement in one of our major parties that doesn't respect the results and doesn't respect the Constitution. Why is it difficult for a journalist to say, well, when he says that, the evidence backs him up?
And to fail to say it, right? To frame it overwhelmingly as, this is Biden's campaign strategy. And by the way, Republicans also say Democrats are a threat to democracy, so who knows? That's bad journalism. You're twisting yourself into a pretzel to avoid reporting the truth. I mean, nobody's asking you to be on the side of Democrats against Republicans or whatever. They're asking you to drop the brain-dead pose of neutrality and get on the side of democracy and on the side of facts. Trump and MAGA are out here playing a raw power game, just going for it, seizing control of everything, and you're like patting yourself on the head for your noble adherence to the conventions of down-the-middle journalism.
This whole topic always makes me think of a quote by David Halberstam, the legendary reporter from the Vietnam War era. He said, "The conventions of the news business required the journalist to be much dumber and more innocent than in fact he is."
Yeah, I mean, I hear that, and it makes me wonder, though, like, if even by saying that, we're letting some folks off the hook. Because it's not just that legacy news organizations are just shrinking from taking bold positions, I think we actually have to consider that some of these institutions and their reporters and editors are politically aligned with aspects of a fascist autocracy, right? I mean, one example I would give is the mainstream media coverage of the genocide in Gaza.
Yeah.
You know, people got fired for naming things which are unequivocally true and on display right now, at a time when maybe reporting those truths more clearly could have affected the outcome, right? And then as things are unfolding, there was just a systematic failure to call it what it is, or even to really show what it is.
I've had so many conversations, especially with younger people, about the fact that they had to turn to TikTok or someplace like that to see images of the atrocities in Gaza by the Israeli Defense Forces, this grotesque slaughter of Palestinian civilians, and with the help of their staunch ally, the United States, who was providing funding and weaponry for the thing, and really the only international political backing that Israel was getting.
You know, we talked earlier in the season about the period around the American Revolution when most white people in America and the white press were on board with the genocidal attacks on indigenous people on this continent and with an economic system based on the enslavement of kidnapped Africans. Here we are 250 years later, and it's just inescapable to say that the establishment media is all too comfortable with the mass slaughter of a people, talking about Palestinians, who the dominant American culture sees as brown, Muslim, and expendable. I mean, that's the only way I can think about why there's not even more conversation about what has occurred over the last few years. Where's the outrage in the legacy media about that massacre that the U.S. government fully is participating in and that American taxpayers are funding?
There you go again, Chenj, with one of those provocative rants of yours. And
you might want to cut it.
Guess what? We're going to keep that one in too. In this episode so far, we've been looking at the news media itself and how it's performed in the face of Trumpism and the assault on American democracy, and we heard from experts about the national picture. But what about folks on the receiving end of all this?
For real. I mean, I know you spent a lot of time down in southeastern North Carolina. How did this all play out there?
In my interviews there, I tried to explore why did Trump do so well in the border belt? And in particular, how did the media system in its current state contribute to that result?
You know, it's kind of interesting to think, too, how the politics has changed for these rural areas, too. So
that's Penny Abernathy on that drive we took in Scotland County. Penny is the former news executive and journalism professor, now retired and living where she grew up, near Laurinburg.
So the Democrats did not lose Scotland County until 2020. They lost Robinson in 2016.
This is an important part of the story, how recently this region shifted from mostly blue to solid red in presidential elections. In the 4 border belt counties we focused on, Democrats won consistently, really until Donald Trump. Jimmy Carter, Michael Dukakis, Bill Clinton, Al Gore, each of those Democrats won all 4 counties. Barack Obama, he won 3 of the 4 counties both times in 2008 and 2012.
That's a big deal, man. And for me, the reason it's a big deal is because it throws a wrench into some of the narratives and explanations that are shared by people I talk to about this. Like, how do you make sense of people voting for Obama in one election and Trump in the next election?
Researchers have estimated there were roughly 8 million of those people across the country, about 13% of Trump's voters in 2016.
Scotland County voted for Hillary in 2016.
As Penny explained, Donald Trump won 3 of the 4 border belt counties in 2016 and all 4 the next 2 cycles. When I asked folks why Trump has done so well in the border belt, one answer was social issues. This is Garland Pierce, a Democratic state representative whose district includes Robeson County.
Abortion, all these other issues that in the Bible Belt, and I understand it.
Others pointed to people's anger over the collapse of the manufacturing economy, with NAFTA and the opening of free trade with China.
Oh, it happened. I mean, the bottom fell out.
This is Carol McCall, Penny Abernathy's friend. She's a retired Scotland County employee and a former Democratic county commissioner. Carol also pointed to what she calls Trump's angry white man posture.
Essentially giving permission for hateful language, discrimination, bigotry, misogyny. They didn't just develop. He didn't create them. He just gave permission for them to come out and explode.
But some people did talk about trends in the media. Les High is a former newspaper publisher in Whiteville, North Carolina. He now leads an online news site, the Border Belt Independent.
When you had Facebook and people were able to talk about their conservative ideas, and then when you saw Fox News and other conservative news organizations begin to become more aligned with commentary. And a lot of that commentary was fear-based, and fear works.
I also talked with Les High's colleague, Sarah Nagum. She's the editor of the Border Belt Independent.
Donald Trump resonated with voters at just the right time, right? People were frustrated. They were not feeling a lot of hope.
When I asked Nagum about the relationship between political changes in a place like the Border Belt and changes in the media landscape, she goes straight to the crisis of trust.
A lot of people do not trust the media. And look at why that is, right? You know, Trump has told people not to trust the media. You know, Fox News, again, conservative talk radio, has told people do not trust mainstream media. So, you know, it's no big question mark as to why this has happened.
And does that seem... I ask her, is that mistrust stronger than it was 20 years ago, when she was starting a career as a reporter in small-town North Carolina?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
What do you hear, Chenj?
To me, the answers these folks are giving you just reinforce everything we've learned in this episode. There were reasons why Donald Trump appealed to roughly half the country: political, economic, social, reasons having to do with race. But he also came along at just the right moment, or just the wrong one, in the history of the news media. Our big corporate media outlets, the ones most people pay attention to, did not speak clearly enough about the danger. And to the extent that journalists did tell people what they needed to know, a lot of people had tuned out.
Let's do a call back to Ethan Jordan, the young farmer I interviewed in his tractor in Columbus County. Remember what he said back in episode 1. When a TV network did negative reporting about Trump, too much of it, it seemed to him, Ethan heard bias.
And that's where I'd get irritated and not want to listen to it.
Next time.
If there is no commercial future for journalism, we need to find a non-commercial future. And I don't mean just throwing some more money at NPR and PBS.
Thinking about solutions and repairs, how we might build a better and more democratic news media. The News was created and produced by me, John Biewen, with Chenjerai Kumanyika and story editor Diane Hodson. Assistant producer Arlene Arevalo. Fact-checking by Anna Pujol Mazzini. Music by Brian Blade and the Fellowship Band, Michelle Osis, Lily Hayden, Alex Weston, James Nathan Jones, Goodnight Lucas, and Jason Hill. Music consulting by Joe Augustine of Narrative Music. You can find transcripts and more about the show at our website, scenonradio.org. The show is distributed by PRX. Scene on Radio comes to you from the Kenan Institute for Ethics